Welcome. Welcome, y'all. So, we lost the VOD from last time, but I think what I'm just gonna do is I'm gonna go over a recap. I'm hoping to shoot for maybe 30 minutes of just a recap of everything from last stream. Um, I fixed the chat so that it should not disappear so quickly. Um, and I also will not. Oop, we're dropping frames. Okay. Hopefully. Oh no. That's not good. 0 kilobits per second. That's. Okay, and we're back. Um. I died for a second there. I think we're green. Yeah, we're in the green now. Um. But for a second, my internet just completely crapped out on me. So, VOD viewers will, experience a couple seconds of silence with me, but, alright, let's see. Is there any... I think that's it for now. Alright. So, let me take away this. We'll go ahead and start. So, the main thing that we were starting out is, this document is the kind of put forward as the main document for Deep Ecology. It's hosted by openairphilosophy.org, which is Arne Naess's uh, like pet sort of organization. And Arne Naess is like the chief spokesperson in the 70s and 80s for Deep Ecology. He didn't like coin, or he didn't like make the movement, but he coined the movement. Um, so in this, uh, he put together some tenets for that we'll take a look at. We took a look at last stream, but unfortunately we lost the VOD because I don't know how Twitch settings work. But we're learning. This is a learning process. Um, so he starts out by criticizing a field ecologist, which he refers to as K, because he doesn't want to, you know, call them out by name. Um, and he talks about how oftentimes, even though we will in private hold radical ideas, we will not in public share those radical ideas or stand by them for very long, because the pressures of capitalism will oftentimes make us become more mild, because they'll think that we're incredulous, for example. And to keep our credibility, um, we'll become more mild. So we talked about the arguments of, yeah, exactly. It can be just as dangerous. Um, in this case, it was. Oop. Oh yeah, I forgot to put it in my own server. That's quite embarrassing. Um, in this case, we looked at how uh, there was a law that allowed bears to be killed even though they were protected if they were harassing sheep enough. And what happened was capitalists would just not protect their sheep so that the bears would harass the sheep enough so they could kill the bears. This is a classic thing that happens all the time. They exploit the legislation in a way by being lazy, so they'll just kill the bears. They just find whatever is the easiest path, not caring about what is ecologically sound. And what was Kay's reaction to this? Did did they say this is detestable? We need to upheave our entire way of caring for the sheep. We need to hire shepherds, which they weren't doing. No, they instead bent their knee to the entire management and maintained a shallow position on wildlife management. Um, and we talked about how, like, when we engage capitalists on their grounds, they can seem reasonable. Like, they can say, "Oh, well, it costs so much money to hire and equip rescuers to locate a flock of sheep that's being harassed by the bear. Why can't we just kill the bear?" Um, but in reality, they're the ones that are putting the flock in danger in the first place. They're the ones who are going into the bear territory in the first place. They're the ones who are putting themselves in this bind. It's not, you know, reasonable to just kill the bear. It's that, but they make it seem reasonable because, they say, "Oh, well, look how much money it would cost to save the bear." But in reality, they're the one who's putting the bear at risk, or putting the sheep at risk in the first place. Um, and this is only one example of what happens with many. Uh, there are a lot of forces of growth, um, and oftentimes because ecologists are so focused on like one aspect of their field and not on a more wide area of expertise, they can be kind of out. Um, I don't know, like they lack a more comprehensive view, and while they have those values in place, oftentimes they'll lose their jobs if they fight. You know, they'll lose their influence and their status if they fight, and so they can't really fight for these general policies. So in the private, they might be like, yeah, we need these deep, far-reaching changes, but in public, they can't really be that expert that says, yeah, we need to upheave society, we need to change a bunch. Um, and then he goes into this idea of like this analogy of how oftentimes capitalism will try to solve problems that don't really even need to be solved. So, we have a family in in a room with four chairs, and then one of them decides, "Oh, I want to put 10 chairs in this room because I really want to optimize the amount of chairs that I can put in this room." And then the two of the four family members are like, "Hell yeah, we're good at optimization. Let's try to max out the amount of chairs that we can put in." And so they go in to try to solve the sophisticated mathematical problems involved, and then they go to the fourth member and they're like, "How can we get you need to work overtime to get the money to purchase the 10 chairs." And the final family member is like, "I really don't think that we need 10 chairs in here." And they're like, "Okay, well then you need to go and work through all alternative solutions to the Chen chair problem, because you have to prove to us that the 10 chair problem doesn't work." And she's like, "I don't want 10 chairs. I never wanted 10 chairs. I was fine with 4 chairs." And this is what happens with anarchists and with people who have a completely different paradigm. Is we don't want the exploitation. We don't want the infinite growth. We don't want to constantly expand and constantly exploit. It's just, and when we're faced with, okay, well, how do you solve, border problems, for example? The answer is, well, we wouldn't have borders, you know? Or how do you solve um, drug crime? And the answer is, most drug crime we wouldn't give a shit about, you know? Um, we would, and in this case, he's talking about life rich in intrinsic values and simple means, and enjoying life and not trying to, um, like constantly increase. the standard of living. So like, oh, you know, how would you solve the constant, you know, need to replace, you know, phones with more and more phones, you know? How would you replace Apple if you're replacing capitalism? And the answer is we wouldn't have an analog for Apple. Apple would not exist. Apple would be bye-bye. You know. Um but we don't need to have an analog for Apple. We just say Apple is not a desired end. Um, so then it comes to what he sees as a solution to this. How do we solve the fact that those who stand by their principles seem to kind of be either made a laughing stock or lose their jobs or um, what have you. And for him, in my opinion, this kind of rings hollow. Because this was made in the late 80s, I believe, and this is 2023, and it, this is still not the case. But what he sees is that if enough of us refuse to compromise, excuse me, if enough of us refuse to compromise and enough of us make ourselves unabashed deep ecology supporters, they will have no choice but to select us. And I do agree with this, right? This is ultimately what we have to do in order to succeed is we have to get more and more people on board with us. More and more common people need to understand that, you know, the theories of deep ecology, the theories of anarchism, and not just be complacent. But in this case, he's talking about conservationists. And so, in his view, what he wants is that he wants the politicians to have no choice to where they can't choose someone who's complacent. They can only choose the only effective people for conservation efforts will be those who are basically based, right? For lack of a better term. Um, and sure, this is something that in theory works, but in practice, like most of the time, politicians just say that they support. You know, they agree. They're like, yes, we should support the environment, and then they don't do shit. So I really think that what we should be doing is getting the everyday person to be wanting to do something and forcing their politician to actually give a shit, you know. Not just letting the politician say yes we should be doing something and then doing jack shit about it. um, Protesting, and when nothing is done, you know, get get unmanageable, force them to listen, become ungovernable, essentially. And that's how it's gonna go in the next tens of years, is as the situation gets worse and worse, the people are going to have to get more and more ungovernable, so the politicians have to listen. Because ultimately, the loop of what has to what has to happen, or the loop of, oh, you know, we yes, the environment's very important, and then doing jack shit. That happens and is gonna continue to happen for a very long time. Um, so so we can't just like sit here and just like try and be aggressive with our voting. We also have to be using the voice of the people. And the voice of the people is protest, and that's not just peaceful protest. That's also unmanageable protest. Um, so, in my opinion, while he's talking about specifically experts, I think that the people in this case serve a big role in this speaking out. Okay, so what is deep ecology? There are several tenets. The first point of deep ecology is that the well-being and flourishing of human and non-human life on Earth has value in and of itself. These are independent of the usefulness of the non-human world for human purposes. So, it doesn't matter how useful you are to humans, you have value. You know, the the random weird crab in the dark cave that has no eyes and, fucks and kills itself at the same time will and has no use to humans is beautiful in its own way and is value and has value. Um, we need to preserve it and it we have no right to well, actually that's a different point. The richness and diversity of life forms contribute to the relation of these values and are also values in and of themselves. So diversity of life and complexity of life are in of themselves also values. And an important thing to note here is that diversity is means that both the simple and the complex are valued. Because if we just had very complex organisms without the simple ones, we wouldn't have diversity. And so the bugs and the plants and excuse me, the bacteria and the single-celled organisms, and even more simple than that, are equally valued because they help contribute to the diversity. Because again, you can't have diversity without also having the simple life forms. Um, this is in complete contrast to a lot of Enlightenment and New Age writers who will view like humans as like the pinnacle, or like life as like a chain of like slowly developing organisms that get better and better and better. But truly, right, the simple fulfill the roles the complex simply can't because complexity is too costly. Right, you're exactly right. Um, each one has their special roles that they fulfill, and as we said earlier, it's inherent to them. Um, up in then with point three, we have human beings have no right to reduce this richness and diversity except to satisfy vital needs. And vital needs is really, really complicated, but essentially it's left intentionally vague because vital needs is what we need to make our life flourish, right? It includes emotional fulfillment. It includes, having a life that's worth living, right? And it also includes like food and shelter and things. Uh, it's what we take from our surroundings that fulfill us. And then it's nothing more than that. Because there is such thing as having an excess. And you can see that in capitalism, I think. And you can see that where we get into point 7, where in capitalism, there's this ideology of constantly exploiting everything around you to try to infinitely increase your quality of life and constantly having growth. And that's not what we're focusing on. We're focusing on maintaining a quality of life that is satisfactory and not having any more than that. So then, number 4, the flourishing of human life and cultures is compatible with substantial decrease of the human population. The flourishing of non-human life requires such a decrease. So, what this is first off, the flourishing of human life and cultures is compatible with substantial decrease of human population. We talked about how ecofascism usually just latches on to substantial decrease of human population and doesn't see the first part of flourishing of human life and cultures. Really, what we need to see is that as we decrease the population, we can still have a rich culture and we can still have a very lively and interconnected community, and it's not something that is going to happen forcefully, right? It can't happen forcefully because there's no way for human life and cultures to flourish if it happens forcefully. Now, with ecofascism, what they want to do is they want to reduce the population quickly. And first off, we know that reducing populations quickly is not sustainable, right? It never um, actually works in the long run because of dead cat bounces and different things like that, to use something from economy. But on top of that, the the ethical ramifications of it is just terrible. Um, don't be an eco-fash. Ta, right? um, but I genuinely do believe that the flourishing of non-human life is a goal that we should strive for, and that includes having large biomes where it's not habited largely by humans, that we manage the ecosystem, we make sure that it's healthy and make sure that it's flourishing, but it's not inhabited greatly by us. And yeah, exactly. Like, if you're injecting fascism into your ideology, you're gonna end up with it being bad. You could have uh, the perfect ideology, and then you just like sprinkle a hint of fascism in it, and you ruin the batch. Um, it really is poison. Um, so, and this is important because it and he talks about this later. it's required to allow organisms to evolve. Having large areas of species allows organisms to speciation to sorry to go through speciation to speciation. Goodness. Yeah, exactly. Fascism with good intentions is just fascism. Number five is human interference is with non-human world is excessive and the situation is rapidly worsening. This is not just climate change, but a lot of this is climate change. If you don't accept climate change, then it's like, okay, why are you here, right? But also, like, this is the way we structure our societies with, like migrating animals. This is the way that we've like built our entire world. This goes back into the fact that we inhabit basically like so much of the world where you know we're one species out of how many, and we inhabit what percentage of the world. That's not fair. um it really is like manifest destiny on a different level. um it's something that needs to be rolled back. And if you don't see that, then I don't really know what to say to you, you know? Policies must therefore be changed. These policies affect basic economic, technological, ideological structures. The resulting state of affairs will be deeply different from the present state of affairs. He talks a little bit more about this, about how, like, how much different they will be, how we will need to be like we will have to fundamentally change the way we look at economic growth, because right now economic society like economy is constantly wanting to grow. We have inflation where and companies will like look at, oh, we didn't grow 15% as like a loss, and that is wild because we're constantly wanting our economy to grow, grow, grow. And that's why inflation happens. And that's why all of this happens. And it's not sustainable. Um, so we're going to need an entire paradigm shift. It's just entirely needed. Um, so we're going to need an entire paradigm shift in order to actually structure the economy in a way that is sustainable. And that would be maintaining an even net equal. Currently, economists want, for example, when you're looking at inflation, they want inflation to steadily increase slowly. Um, and there are some people who dissent that, but it is kind of a window into what our economy looks like, of how they view a healthy economy as one where workers' salaries are constantly being diminished slightly. It it's wild. The final the final two are, well, the final one is less of a tenet and more of a call to action. But number 7 is very important in my opinion. It's that ideological change is mainly that of appreciating quality of life rather than adhering to increasing higher standing of living. there'll be a profound awareness between the difference between big and great. I really like this one because to me it hits at the entire paradigm of taking what we need from nature and only what we need, and getting that emotional fulfillment in our life, living a happy life and appreciating it. And ultimately, when we actually are living a life that is worth living, we don't need to constantly be exploiting the entire world around us, or when it comes to like capitalism, exploiting like the global south, or exploiting like the people around us, exploiting like the resources from the earth, exploiting like you have things like lithium mines and the terrible atrocities that happen at them uh, in the global south, for example. Um, and when you have a when you can reach a point where you have a quality of life that you can maintain, instead of constantly like the American dream where you're just climbing the ladder and trying to get more and more and more and more. It's an entirely different like way of living, and I really think that this is something unique to eco-anarchism, and I think that it's an incredibly important thing. And then the last point is that those who subscribe to these 7 points are they have an obligation to directly or indirectly try to implement necessary changes. Um, and then it is this principle that highlights the importance of deep questioning as a process to follow, develop, and enact in other principles. And so that's what we're covering today is deep questioning. So I think I did like 35 minutes for recap. So I almost hit my goal. Hello. I think this is Ariel. Uh it's very good to see you. Um uh I did a stream yesterday, but I lost the VOD, so I was doing a recap on everything. So now we will get into deep versus shallow ecology. So, a number of key terms and slogans from environmental debate will clarify the contrast between shallow and deep ecology movements. Yes, I'm now doing that. I now figured out how to do that, Ravani. I didn't do it the first time. So, in terms of pollution, technology seeks to purify the air and water and to spread pollution more easily. Laws limit permissible pollution. Polluting industries are preferably exported to developing countries. Funny thing, we kind of see a lot of this happening. Um, Particularly with limiting permissible pollution. This is a shallow approach. Um, the deep approach. Pollution is evaluated from a biospheric approach, not centering on its effects on human health, but on life as a whole, including life conditions of every species and system. The shallow reaction to acid rain is to avoid action by demands for more research. Demands to find species of trees tolerating high acidity and so on, whereas the deep approach concentrates on what is going on in the total ecosystem and asks for high priority fight against the economy. and technology responsible for acid rain. The priority is to fight deep causes for pollution, not merely the superficial short-range effects. The third and fourth worlds cannot afford to pay the total cost of the war against pollution in their regions, and consequently they require assistance of the first and second worlds. Exporting pollution is not only a crime against humanity, but also against life. Um, Acid rain is actually a really good example of when we actually did something right for once. Acid rain was a really big problem, and we actually researched what caused it and figured out what caused it and regulated it in, uh, at least in the US, very, very quickly. If you grew up, especially in the 2000s and the 90s, you were probably told and taught about acid rain a bunch because we thought it was going to be a really big problem. And since this was made in the 90s, they thought it was going to be a really big problem. Now we don't deal with acid rain at all because it's been regulated now. The emission of sulfates in in um, by power plants is like basically illegal. You have to completely filter them out. Um, I believe it's sulfates. I can't remember exactly what specific one, but no, now I have to look it up. Acid rain. Yeah, sulfur dioxide was what it was, not sulfates. Sulfur dioxide. Um, excuse me. They reduce them into sulfates when they use the I think it's limestone filters. Um, but it's a good example of where did my mouse go? OBS has stolen my mouse. Give me my mouse back. Oh no. Yes, this is a very professional stream. Oh no. Why is my mouse disappeared? How am I supposed to... Okay, I just deal with it, I guess. Oh no. That's not what I meant to do. Oh, this is terrible. Yeah, it just completely disappeared on me. Hmm. Well, I accidentally, oh, there we go. Okay. Alright, we're back. We're back. Alright. Um, that was just an intermission to, help you all relax. Um, and for me to get this water bottle that I'm drinking right now. Okay. I still don't have a mouse, but we'll figure that out later. Yeah, we'll figure that later. So, a shallow approach to resources. The emphasis on resources for human beings, especially the present generation of affluent societies. In this Oh, sorry. The emphasis is on resources for human beings, especially the present generation in affluent societies. In this view, Earth's resources belong to those who have the technology to exploit them. There is confidence that the resources will not be depleted because, as they get rarer, a high market price will conserve them, and substitutes will be found through technological process. This is known as cornucopiaism. If you ever want to look up this viewpoint, it's called cornucopiaism. Further, animals and plants and natural objects are valuable only as resources for human beings. If no humans use is known, they can be destroyed with indifference. And this happens very often. Um, like ore parts of ores that don't have use are just discarded in the process of refining. The deep approach. The concern here is with the resources and the habitat for all life forms and for their own sake. No natural object is conceived of solely as a resource. This then leads to a critical evaluation of humans' modes of production and consumption. One must ask, to what extent does an increase here favor ultimate values in human life? To what extent does it satisfy vital needs, locally and globally? How can economic, legal, and educational institutions be changed to counteract destructive increases? How can resource use serve the quality of life rather than the economic standard of living as generally promoted in consumerism? There is an emphasis here on an ecosystem approach, rather than just consideration of isolated life forms or local situations. There's a long-range maximal perspective of time and place. So you can see the theme here. It's it's basically considering the long-term effects, but also considering the whole rather than just the shallow approach, which is only humans and only human gains, considering all life forms and their inherent value. Population. The threat of human overpopulation is seen mainly as a problem for developing countries. One condones or even cheers population increases in one's own country for short-sighted economic, military, or other reasons. This is the shallow approach. An increase in the number of human beings is considered a value in itself or as economically profitable. The issue of optimum population for humankind is discussed without reference to the question of the optimum population for other life forms. The destruction of wild habitats caused by increasing population of humans is accepted as an inevitable evil. Drastic decreases of wild life forms tend to be accepted as long as the species is not driven to extinction. This is seen very, very often. Oh, oh, you gotta be kidding me. I did the thing again. Okay. Animal social relations are ignored. The long-term substantial reduction of the global human population is not seen as a desired goal. One has a right to defend one's borders against, quote, illegal aliens, no matter what the population pressures elsewhere. So, this this is one thing that people see all the time, is that like they don't really care about the reduction of populations of animals until it comes to extinction. It's like they value the animal existing, but they don't value the animal thriving. You know, as long as the animal is like not at extinction, they don't really care. Another thing that is constantly ignored is like animal social relations. So like when we have penguins that are constantly harassed by tourists in Argentina, they don't really care. They don't really do anything about it, and they don't really um, have like a any sort of care for that. The that animals should be left to their natural environment when necessary. Um, but a deep approach to the population. Let's see what that is. It is recognized that excessive pressures on planetary life conditions stem from the human population explosion. The pressure stemming from the industrial societies is a major factor, and the population reduction must have priority on those societies, as well as in developing countries. Estimates of an optimal human population vary. Some quantitative estimates are 100 million, 500 million, or 1,000 million, which is 1 billion, by the way. So about roughly 1/8 of the humans that we have right now. But it's recognized that must be a long-range human population reduction through mild but tenacious political and economic measures. This will make possible as a result of increased habitat and population growth for thousands of species that are now constrained by human pressures. That's about it. We really need to increase the amount of population, or um, the amount of space that animals have with rewilding, and decrease the amount of space that humans have, because we have enough space. We've taken up quite enough. He also says that industrialized societies and those should take preference on reducing theirs first. Um, and I think that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, because oftentimes what happens is any environmental effort, people turn to the global south and go, "You first," because that's what happens all the time. Is they always turn to the global south and say, "You first," because of course they do, because that's what they always want, because that's what the global south is constantly exploited. But really, the global north is the problem, in this case, mostly. I mean, if you look at who exploits, look at Europe. Just look at Europe. The population density of Europe. Look at that. That's the problem. That needs to be reduced. There's a reason why Europe's forests have been decimated. Cultural diversity and appropriate technology. Shallow approach. Industrialization in the kind manifested in the West is held to be the goal for developing countries, and the universal adoption of Western technology is compatible with mild cultural diversity and the conservation of good, from the Western point of view, elements in the present day of non-industrial societies. There is a low estimate of deep cultural differences and that of deviate significantly from Western standards. We see this a lot. There's accept we accept cultural diversity to a point, just a little bit of it. Just and the stuff that is accepted is like the stuff that is manageably exotic, shall we say. Um, and the industrialization um, is like uh, it's the goal to industrialize the the countries. So the deep ecology. Cultural diversity is an analog on the human level for the biological richness and diversity for life forms. We should give high priority to cultural anthropology in education and in industrial societies. We should limit the impact of Western technology on non-industrial countries and defend the Fourth World against foreign domination. Political and economic policies should favor subcultures with industrialized societies, or within industrialized societies. Local soft technologies will allow a basic cultural assessment of any technical innovations. The deep approach freely criticizes so-called advanced technology and concepts of progress. So this is one where oftentimes, like, deep ecology can be very good bedfellows with Anne Prims. Um, because deep ecology does oftentimes criticize, like, concepts of progress technologically, like advanced technology. Um, Oftentimes because it it also challenges the, like, advanced technology as it comes to improving, like, standard of living. Um, and it also, like, as it says here, oh, absolutely, yeah. And prims are uh not my not 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 good. Not good. I'm not a fan of and prims. Um but they are the, like, unfortunate younger sister or younger sibling of of uh this sort of, just like how eco-fascists are kind of like something that we have to deal with, and friends are something that we have to deal with, that also will sometimes try to use deep ecology. Um, So it's important to recognize the differences between this and prem things. Um, I will say with Anprim stuff, it can be a little bit more difficult to suss out than just ecofascism, because with ecofascism, it's just like there's fascism, like it rears its ugly head. It's pretty fucking easy. Um, but with 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 I probably should be careful using. I don't know what the should I if I'm gonna use adult language, should I mark the stream as adult? I just realized that. Anyway, um, do that. If I had a mouse, maybe it would be easier. I can't see where I'm clicking half the time. Okay. Um, it is important to note that Deep Ecology does want to protect um the in this case it says the fourth world, which would be like the world not exposed to Western industrialization from that industrialization. Yeah, exactly. The snake ate my mouse. All right. The difference I would say with anprems would be that with anprems they detest technology itself, and whereas here we're just detesting westernization and the impact of westernization on non-industrial countries. Um, because ultimately, I think we can mostly agree that westernization is bad. So, if we can avoid it, we would. With that said, I do think that, that if possible, yeah, difficulty navigating a complex society. It's very hard. It's it's honestly a big dilemma because it can feel a bit like it's hard sitting here with like medical technology and being like, okay, like I want to bring this medical technology to this country or to these people, right? But then knowing that like there's no possible way that I can bring this medical technology without also bringing this inherent terrible baggage of westernization with it. So like how how to how to walk that line that is absolutely impossible to walk. You can't. You absolutely can't. And it kind of is sitting there like, my empathy. It definitely is tough. Because I think that is one thing that like I definitely don't have an aversion to is medical technology in terms of quality of life. All right, land and sea ethics. So the shallow approach to land and sea ethics would be landscapes, ecosystems, rivers, and other wholes of nature are cut into fragments. Larger units and gestalts are disregarded. These fragments are regarded as the property and resources of individuals, organizations, or states. Conservation is argued in terms of multiple use and cost benefit analysis. Hello. Social costs and long term ecological costs are not included. Wildlife management conserves nature for the future of generations of human beings. Erosions of soils or groundwater's quality is noted as a human loss, but strong belief in future technological progress makes deep changes seem unnecessary. This is a placeholder PNG or tuber because the artist that I have is taking a little bit of time to finish the commission. So I decided I was just gonna stream using the video tuber minis placeholder, and it's a little deer. I can't remember their name. It's very cute. But welcome. We're currently discussing deep versus shallow ecology. Um, so in this case, we're talking about land and sea ethics. Um, this case is a shallow ecology. Please don't eat me. So this is very common. Is like the future of humans. We need to conserve nature for the future of humanity. Um, Conservation being a cost benefit analysis instead of um, you know, it just being worth it for the sake of conservation. And let's be realistic. We only have a certain amount of money, but the The so we will have to do a cost benefit analysis on what will help the most. French bullshit in the chat. We will have to be doing some cost benefit analysis, but ultimately it's the air with which it's done and not doing this for almost in an accounting way, seeing what can we get the squeeze the most conservation out of this budget sort of way. Um, this is a shallow approach. Now the deep approach, which is the preferable approach. You're right. The planet will survive with or without us. But it is worth noting that the diversity of life that's currently here may not survive without us. So so that part we do. It would be good if we could conserve, you know. Excuse me, I've been yawning. I didn't have my coffee today. Um, so if the deep approach to land and sea ethics would be that the Earth does not belong to human beings. Yes, once the sun explodes. But I feel like once the sun explodes, life had a really good run. After that, we we had a good run. Oh yeah, when it expands, I mean. Um, this is an interesting thing about how anarchists view the the land. Um, we talk a lot about ownership by use, for example. And ecosystems own the land that they're on due to ownership by use. Um, and you can't just own land because you're not using it. The ecosystem is. So Earth does not belong to human beings. The human beings only inhabit the land, using the resources to satisfy their vital needs. If their non-vital needs conflict with the vital needs of the non-human life forms, human beings might yield. The destruction now going on will not be cured by a technological fix. Current arrogant notions in industrial and other societies must be resisted. So, as we saw in the shallow approach, they're like hanging on for like a technological progress that's going to like solve groundwater problems and like solve all these different things. And we can't just like hang on for technology to solve our problems. That's not going to work. We actually covered this earlier, Alex, about how the view of that all um, the view of richness and diversity of life. Hang on, my mouse is gone, so I have to. The richness and diversity of life forms contribute to the relation of their value, and that the simple and lower primitive species equally contribute to that diversity, and so they're equally valuable. It's a tenet of deep ecology. Not you, now, obviously, you don't have to believe in deep ecology, but but this is what this paper would say. Now, education and scientific enterprise. I think that's where we're at. Yeah. The shallow approach. The degradation of the environment and resource depletion necessitate the further training of experts who can advise on how to combine economic growth with the maintenance of a healthy environment. We are likely to need highly manipulative technology when the global economic growth makes further degradation inevitable. The scientific enterprise must continue to give priority to the hard sciences. This necessitates high educational standards with intense competition in relevant tough areas of learning. There's this obsession with not compromising economic growth, that we need to continue to grow and we need to develop technology in order to grow and grow and grow. We've talked about Kurzgesagt before and their like green growth mentality that the economic growth is going to solve climate change. Um, this is exactly the the shallow approach, that we just need more technology, and that's what's we just need more people going into hard sciences and researching and researching and researching, and that's new technology is what's going to save us. We don't need to restructure our society at all. We don't need to right. We don't need to do anything different. We just need to develop more technology and we'll be okay. That's what they say. Let me get a drink of water. All right. So then the deep approach, on the contrary, education should concentrate on an increased sensitivity in the non-consumptive goods and all such consumables as we have enough of all, provided sane ec- as enough, sorry, and on such consumables as we have enough of for all, provided sane ecological policies are adopted. Education will therefore counteract the excessive valuation of things with a price tag. There should be a shift in emphasis from the hard to soft sciences, especially those that stress local culture and global cooperation. The educational objective of the World Conservation Strategy for building support for conservation should be accorded priority within the deeper framework of respect for the biosphere. In the future, there will be no shallow movement. If the shallow politics are increasingly adopted by governments, and thus need no support for social movement. Yeah, more sociology, more soft sciences, more local cooperation. This is an article, but he's probably lived outside a city. But yeah. Um, why do you say that? I'm curious. We'll take a little break here because we've gotten to a very good breaking point. And I can, in the meantime, while you're typing, I can try to figure out where my mouse went.
Hi everybody, welcome to this video. So in this video I'm going to show you how to fix the cursor disappearing on OBS. So right here, for example, you see I have my cursor here, but if I enter the code area, you see my cursor disappears. So to fix this, all you have to do is you'll have to double click on the display capture here, and right here you see it says automatic capture method automatic. Alright, so one click on that, and I recommend that you use Windows 10 1903 and up. So if you click on that one, and you see that it will show you the cursor. So even if
Oh, my cursor's back. Fair enough. I don't know how my cursor just randomly came back. So the shallow view that they're putting forward is actually the view that they're refuting. So you came a little bit late, um, but each one of these that says shallow, and when I was saying that this is the shallow view, this is the thing that they're like trying to say this is the bad thing. So like for example, you're all good. I didn't explain that when you came in, so um you're all good. But I do agree, if you were looking at the shallow approach, these look like very stupid because they're presented and immediately refuted. So 'cause this I'm so glad I got my cursor back, but I wish I knew how I got it back. Um, so the solutions that he's putting forward are the the ones labeled deep. So, for example, moving more towards the soft sciences, for example, um, and stressing local culture and um, global cooperation. Um, I I think that this is kind of like, if I'm gonna be honest, I think this is kind of buzzwordy in my personal opinion. Um, I do think that we should stress local culture and have global cooperation. I think that this is just this is kind of something that everyone can say. I don't know, maybe Republicans wouldn't say global cooperation, but uh go stress sciences that we're shifting towards sciences that stress local culture, so like that emphasize it. So like put a stress or an emphasis on local culture. This is on particularly for education, scientific enterprise, the approach towards this. Yeah, this is from I can't remember exactly when, but I want to say 80 80 89. Mhm. It's from the 80s. That much I know. All right. So then why deep ecology? The decisive difference between shallow and a deep ecology movement hinges on the willingness to question and to appreciate the importance of questioning every economic and political policy in public. The questioning is deep and public. It asks why and more it asks why more insistently and consistently, taking nothing for granted. Deep ecology can readily admit that the practical effectiveness of anthropocentric arguments, and this is a quote, is essential for conservation to be seen as central to human interests and aspirations. At the same time, people, from heads of states to members of rural communities, will most readily be brought to demand conservation if they themselves recognize the contribution of the conservation to the achievement of their needs as perceived by them and the solution of their problems as perceived by them. This is from the IUCN. So basically what this is saying is that conservation things won't get passed if human interests aren't served by them. So really, like, we need to we need to in some way serve human interests in our conservation practically. You know, if we really screw over humans constantly with our conservation efforts, they're not going to have political traction, unfortunately, in this world right now. Since most policies serving the biosphere also serve humanity in the long run, they may, at least initially, be accepted on the basis of narrow anthropocentric arguments. Nevertheless, such a tactical approach has significant limitations. There are three dangers. First, some policies based on successful anthropocentric arguments turn out to violate or compromise unduly objectives of deeper argumentation. Second, the strong motivation to fight for decisive change and willingness to serve a great cause are weakened. And third, the complicated arguments for human-centered conservation documents, such as the World Conservation Strategy, go beyond time and ability of many people to assimilate and understand, and often tend to provoke interminable technical disagreements among experts. So the first reason is saying that it's sometimes in order you like we were talking about how sometimes you just can't make things anthropocentric in your argumentation. You really like a successful anthropocentric argument is going to violate or compromise the objectives. And so really you have to make it deep you have to make it to where it's a deep ecological standpoint, or else it's not going to work. It's not going to be a long standing strategy. The second one is what we talked about at the very beginning, where all of the motivation and fight for decisive change is just watered down and the serve for great cause is weakened. And then the third one is a bit complicated. But basically, since you're having to bend over backwards to make all of your arguments appeal to anthropocentrism, instead of just saying, this is what's best for nature, this is what's best for, the ecosystem, you're having to say, like, well, if you act in the interest of the ecosystem, then it'll also help you in the long run because of XYZ. If you think about it under this paradigm, it can get so complicated, and experts can be like, well, technically, under this paradigm, though, ABC is the case. It ends up muddying the waters, and people just start arguing. And it allows politics to start just muddying the waters. So those are the three problems that he sees with trying to do the anthropocentric approach of appealing to the practical anthropocentric argument that the IUCN says that that's what they do. Special interest groups with narrower short-term exploitive objectives run counter to the saner eco-policies that often exploit these disagreements and thereby stall the debate and steps towards effective action. When arguing from deep ecological premises, one need not discuss at all most of the complicated proposed technological fixes. The relative merits of the alternative technological proposals in industrial societies concerned with how to increase energy production are pointless if our vital needs have already been met. So this is getting into more specifically on how arguing from a deep ecological standpoint can aid you when dealing with, like, for example, capitalists. But, like, you can just say, well, why would we need to exploit the land any further? We've met our energy production. We don't need to exploit the land any further. The focus on vital, whereas the capitalist would want to milk the land for as much as it possibly can be milked for. The focus on vital issues activates provides mental energy and strengthens motivation. The shallow environmental approach, on the other hand, tends to make human populations more passive and less interested in environmental issues. The deep ecology movement tries to clarify the fundamental presuppositions underlying our economic approach in terms of values, priorities, philosophy, and religion. In the shallow movement, the argument comes to a halt long before this. The deep ecology movement is therefore the ecology movement that questions deeper. The terms like egalitarianism, homocentrism, anthropocentrism, and human chauvinism are often used to characterize points of view on the shallow to deep ecology spectrum. These terms, though, often usually function as slogans and that are open to misinterpretation. They can imply that human beings are in some respects only plain citizens of the planet on par with other species, but that are sometimes interpreted as denying that humans have any extraordinary traits, or that in situations involving vital interests, human beings have no overriding obligations towards their own kind. They have. So this is basically going and addressing some concerns that people have with deep ecology, where people will say, "Oh, are you saying that humans aren't special?" Or that like you would save a dog over a human, or you would say that a dog is like equal to a human in terms of like value. There's no overriding obligations towards their own kind, etc. Um, this is a little bit out of place, I would say. I think that this just didn't have a place for him to put it, and so he put it here. In any social movement, rhetoric has an essential function of keeping members fighting together under the same banner. Rhetoric formulations also serve to provoke interest among outsiders. Of better known slogans, one might be "Nature knows best," "Small is beautiful," "All things hang together." Clearly, all things in the universe do not hang together at the level of quantum physics or relativity theory. The slogan only expressed the doctrine of global non-cosmic relevance. Only a minority of deep ecology supporters are academic philosophers such as I. Although deep ecology is not a finished philosophical system, this does not mean that the movement philosophers should not try to be as clear as possible. So discussion of deep ecology as a derivational system may be of value. So this, he starts to go into deep ecology as a philosophical system, which I think I'm going to stop here, and I might go into it as at another stream because I'm getting a little bit tired. Let's see here. You can say humans aren't special and still put your own group first. It's not as inherently contradictory as people need it to be. I definitely agree with that. I mean, when you talk about like putting your own group first, you can talk about like humans tend, or just like organisms' tendency to um, value those of greater genetic relation more, and just like leave it at that. And you just don't have to bring morals into it, and you could just say, "I want this." If you want some like moral reason for it, then you know that's between you and your morals. It doesn't have to require being special though. Yeah. Um, but this, as what we've covered up to now, is deep ecology defined. What he goes on is like his personal philosophy. Um, and him as a philosopher, I mean, you can see these charts start to get pretty complex of kind of what he views his sort of derivational system as. He starts using some pretty big words because he is a philosopher. But I think I'm gonna cover that in a different video or a different stream because um, using a word like hypothetico-deductive is a bit too big for my brain right now. But I think that's where I'm gonna call it here. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. I really appreciate it. It was a good stream, and I hope you have a wonderful day.